Welcome back, guys. If you are just joining us, this is INX Prime Live. Remember, we are on your screens every single Monday to Friday between the hours of 6 p.m. and 8 p.m. Now, it's important for us to keep updated with everything and anything that is happening on social media platforms. And we've been seeing this trend a lot actually happening. It is the Jozi versus Jozi account on the platform X. It has been trending on social media recently for showing the scale of decay that has actually affected the city of gold in just the last 10 to 15 years. Now, areas and buildings around the iconic landmarks like the Telkom Tower in the Johannesburg CBD has deteriorated quite shockingly, leading many to ask what is actually behind this rapid decline and what can actually be done to fix it. Now, my guest is urban development expert and partner at Genesis Analytics, Lyle Bethlehem, who is also the former CEO of the JDA, which is the Johannesburg Development Agency. Good evening, Lyle, and thank you for your time this evening.
Good evening, Zarif. Great to be here. Thank you.
Oh, my apologies. Yes, thank you so much, Lal. Just touching on this conversation as well. Now, during your time at the helm of the JDA, which was actually between 2005 and 2010, one could say it really was the golden era for the improvement and upgrading around the CBD. What do you think has actually happened in the last, let's say, 10 to 14 years since? Why are we seeing so much neglect and decay right now?
Well, I think it's got a lot, Zarif, I think it's got a lot to do with political instability. The really difficult thing for a city is to deal with constant change in leadership, because what is required to keep a city going is long-term planning. Cities are organisms that develop over time. So really what has to happen with a city is you need a little bit of vision, you need some inspiration, you need a budget that runs over a number of years, and you need people who are really committed to the city. And I think that the political instability, the administrative instability, the lack of commitment to the city by the city's leadership, the lack of care and concern, I think that many of the elected politicians have felt for the city is what we're seeing.
No, without a doubt. And I mean, you're looking at some of the visuals right now on our screens. It looks absolutely horrible. I mean, 15 years ago, well, even just 2015 to 2023, and there's been a lot of decay and deterioration. It looks horrible in some of these spaces. Well, some of it actually looks quite not too bad. We're seeing a lot of greenery on the one side, but in most cases, it has been decay and deterioration. I want to touch away from, political instability, definitely one of the biggest issues that we have. We have now the GNU coming in, and they're trying to make their own changes. But let's talk about another massive issue, more specifically in the Joburg CBD, and that obviously has to do with hijacked buildings within the space. Now, a lot of it in the CBD is no-go zones for a lot of people, but more specifically tourists as well. What role do you think the government, these development companies, and even any of the private sector can play to be able to find a solution to these big issues that we have of hijacked buildings?
So, Zarif, before we get into hijacked buildings, I just want to say that I think that the GNU approach at the national government is exactly the kind of approach that we need, which is a more stable government that tries to draw on the skills of lots of people. And what we're seeing in the local government in Johannesburg is a great deal of instability. As you know, lots of different mayors, just crazy instability in the city government. So I think we need a proper, stable city government, and not one that kind of changes the mayor every 5 minutes. So I think that more sort of GNU approach, or an approach where different parties work together for the good of the city, that is what we need at the local government level in Johannesburg. And there's a local government election coming up, it needs to be done. But Zarif, you've mentioned the issue of hijacked buildings, and I think hijacked buildings are an absolutely crucial problem. They're a crucial problem, first of all, for the people who live in them. There are tens of thousands of people living in hijacked buildings. Those places are incredibly dangerous, as we've seen, because of the fires and because of other really serious problems that we've had in hijacked buildings. And secondly, they are a real problem in relation to investment, because what they do is they cause a kind of a sinkhole. Anyone who lives or works or has a building nearby, a hijacked building, is going to do their best to get out of there or to not invest in their own property because they're worried about the impact of the other building on their property value. Also, these hijacked buildings are very, very often havens of criminality because the police can't go in there. They're dangerous places. They're often without electricity. So it's a real nightmare for anyone who wants to try and keep any sort of bylaws or any kind of check on criminals. So they are a source of real problems in terms of criminality, but they also have a very, very bad effect on investment and not to mention on the lives of the people who live there. Clearing a hijacked building is a difficult task because the courts have said that the city may not clear a hijacked building unless they find alternative accommodation for each and every person inside the hijacked building at the cost of the city for as long as the person needs it. So it's not just temporary accommodation for, say, 2 weeks or 2 months or even 2 years, but it must be accommodation for as long as the person needs it. Now, that is a very, very high bar that the courts have set. Nonetheless, that is what the courts have said. And it is not impossible to provide alternative accommodation, but it is something that requires investment and effort. And if that is what the courts require, then that is what the city has to do. But really what has to happen with each and every hijacked building is there has to be a court process, there has to be alternative accommodation, there has to be some plan made for the people who live there. And then the building has to be sold or there needs to be a process of reinvestment. So that means bringing in an investor who can then turn the building into decent accommodation or give it to some other use, such as, for example, for shelters or other social kinds of use. But the main thing about hijacked buildings is that they're tough problems. Nobody really wants to deal with a hijacked building. But, if you run a city, that is what you have to do. And if you run Johannesburg, then you have to grasp hold of that nettle.
Yeah, and it is quite a tough one in that. I just want to also touch on, and we were speaking about the law in particular, is it something that you feel like there has been a bit of a push to be able to make amendments to the current laws in place, because it is really in protection of a lot of these situations and a lot of these criminals as well. But away from that, it also delays the process of any massive changes that can actually happen in the CBD.
So I just want to say that, South Africa has a constitution, and that constitution accords people certain basic rights, and the right to shelter is one of them. So I think whatever changes happen to the bylaws, or even a change to a national law, would still require that the city would have to respond to the people who are in the building. And the fact is, people are in these buildings, they're not empty, and people can't just also be thrown onto the streets. So I think that people have to be taken into account in the process of clearing a hijacked building. My view is that the National Treasury and the national government, perhaps the presidency, needs to have a project with the city of Johannesburg. The city of Johannesburg can't actually do this alone. Addressing every hijacked building in the Joburg CBD is a big job. It's a job that needs to be done. But I think the city needs help to do it.
Without a doubt, and we hope to see that assistance as well, and and that hopefully that happens before we know it. But I just want to touch on some of the areas around the CBD, right? And we're looking at places like, for example, there is like Jeppystown as well as Diamond City. We've seen what property developments have actually done more towards the edge of the CBD in that sense. What can actually be done to attract more of these types of investments in buildings and infrastructure as well?
So Zarif, I just want to say that Joburg is an amazing city. We live in an amazing city because it is a city in which people continue to invest, in which every other day you see something fabulous. And I'm not only talking about the CBD, although it includes the CBD. You drive around Johannesburg, every other day there's a new little design quarter, there's a new restaurant, there's creativity, there are businesses popping up, and there are people who care about Johannesburg. There's an organization called Jozi, in which lots of very talented South Africans are getting involved in trying to help Johannesburg. And there are investors. I mean, I was involved for many years in the affordable housing industry and actually trying to create affordable housing. And I've been involved in renovating big buildings. You take a building and the building is completely trashed when you find it, and you work on it. And 18 months later, you created 300, 400, 500 affordable flats. And those flats are in huge demand. And those flats will be rented out and will be 100% full within, a few months, if you maintain the building properly and if you treat your tenants with respect and care. So there is a fantastic affordable housing industry in Johannesburg, including the really brilliant people who did the Jewel City precinct. They have created thousands of beautiful, affordable units. And there they are right in the middle of town. Even in Hillbrow, you find investors. These things are happening because Johannesburg is a city which is vibrant, in which there are huge markets for housing. People want to rent housing. Most people want to pay for their housing. And property developers are going to respond to that. What they need from the city is they need the backbone. They need the infrastructure to be looked after. They need maintenance of the roads. When Bree Street blew up, what is it now, 18 months ago? Still not fixed. How can that be? We've got to maintain the city. And if we want investment, which is the lifeblood of any city, investment by public and private sector, then we need commitment by the city council. We need maintenance to be done every day. I also want to say, Zarif, I think there are lots of good people working for the city of Johannesburg. People every day, Joburg Water, City Power, who are out there doing their best, who are out there really trying to help. But those good people in the city need the support of the political leaders and the administrative leaders. And the first priority of the political and administrative leaders should be the maintenance and investment in the city of Johannesburg, not their own political party, not corruption, not financial issues, but the sustainable investment in the city of Johannesburg. That's what we need. And if we can get that, this will be one of the world's really great cities and also one of the world's most diverse and vibrant cities.
Yeah, we hope to see that very soon. The vision sounds incredible, but like you said, we just need to make sure that we keep a mayor in the same position for at least 3 or 4 years so that at least we have that stability. I just want to touch on, we spoke about the responsibilities of the state, and we also spoke about the responsibilities of developers and investors coming into the space. Let's talk about the people who really make South Africa, right? And that's our everyday citizens of the country. We know that we do have some of the most passionate and some of the most incredible citizens in the world in that sense, which is South African citizens. I want to touch on the kind of work that they do. Now, we do have pockets of excellence by residents who try to actually maintain the various different standards. Would you say that residents should play a much bigger role in keeping Johannesburg clean? Can they then take on the responsibility of cleaning it up? Because if you look at something like the Vodacom Tower, for example, there's at least floors and floors of trash that's actually within the center of the tower, and that's just one building alone.
Yeah. So I do really think that ordinary individuals and companies can play a huge role, and we are seeing that. For example, you take a place like the Wilds. It was an ordinary individual who took on the project of the Wilds, and he has made a tremendous difference to how the Wilds operates. And the Wilds Park is, so much better than it used to be. The Zoo Lake, there is an individual who has taken on the Zoo Lake and made it her project. And she works with City Parks, but every single day she's out there doing what she can. And there are other precincts of the city in which ordinary individuals play a huge role. There are also things called city improvement districts, where the ratepayers in a particular area, and there are lots of these around Joburg, in Sandton, in Rosebank, but also quite a few in town where they actually started, who club in additional money every month. And that money goes to additional maintenance and additional investment in the city, and also things like additional security. So ordinary people can make a huge difference. And I think that's what's going on in Joburg, is that ordinary people are making an incredible difference. And something like Jozi, My Jozi, is yet another example of ordinary people just getting together and saying, hey, this is my city and I want to make it work. But the truth is that none of us can substitute for the state. None of us can be City Power. None of us can be Joburg Water. None of us can collect all the billions of rands that the city collects every year and put it to good use. The city collects huge amounts of rates and taxes and service charges from all of us and from property developers who pay towards infrastructure. And what has to happen is that money needs to be looked after and managed carefully, so that what ordinary citizens do is to supplement what the city does rather than to substitute for the city, because none of us can do that.
No, that's very, very true. I just wanted us to look at something else, and I think innovation and creativity is something that's so important. I'm just looking at some of the newspaper articles that came out a few days ago, where Joburg Mayor Dada Moreno was actually saying, and he launched a competition, right? This competition, I'm just reading it right now. It's a 1 million rand competition where he actually wants residents to come up with all these innovative ideas on how to improve the city. I think that's quite a unique way to look at finding solutions to problems. But what do you think? Do you think that's actually the right approach to be able to get everyone involved through this type of competition?
Well, the city of Mexico City, about 10 years ago, did a fantastic thing. They appointed a new person, not just a chief operating officer and a chief executive and a chief financial officer. They appointed a chief creativity officer in Mexico City. And the job of that person was to be creative about the city and to try to bring on board creative communities into the city and to bring a process of creativity into the heart of government. So I think creativity is a really big part of what has happened. If you look, for example, at like Maboneng or at Hallmark House or some of those wonderful developments in town, a lot of it is about design and creativity. But I do think R1 million is a lot of public money. And R1 million for an idea, well, I don't know. I don't think that substitutes for proper management. So I hope that the mayor gets lots of good ideas. But for me, the problem is not really at the level of ideas. I don't think it's a great mystery what we have to do. So I'm glad if the mayor involves ordinary people. I respect that. But really, what is needed in Johannesburg is not gimmicks, and it's not really even a few good ideas here or there. What is needed in Johannesburg is honest, proper, committed, day-to-day government of the city of Johannesburg.
No, definitely, without a doubt. But again, thank you so much for joining us tonight on INX Prime. It was very, very insightful.
Thank you, Zarif.
Awesome, guys. That is Mrs. Lyle Bethlehem, who is actually the urban development expert and partner at Genesis Analytics, but also the former CEO of the Joburg Development Agency, just sharing with us, this whole very important trend that's happening right now, where it is Jozi versus Jozi, 10 or 15 years ago compared to now, and how this decay and deterioration is affecting the value and the asset that is the city of Joburg. Now, on that note, we are going to take a quick ad break. We'll come right back.